So Reuben's going to come in and line up a tape on a solid state playback machine, an ATR 102 vintage machine with a very specifically chosen tape head and customized playback electronics, and show you the important aspects of lining up a tape. So while he walks in the room, I'm going to put the take-up reel on the machine on the left-hand side, because all of the tapes that come in are stored at tails, meaning less print through on the tape. Take it away.
Thank you. So as you can see, Gavin just put this reel up on this left-hand side here, and that's called the take-up reel. And I'm going to remove my quarantine mask now that we're safe. And so you can see my big smile. So here we go. Now the important thing to consider is that we're playing back a tape source. It's not a digital source, it's a tape source. And when you're dealing with digital, and you have a printed mix, that mix stays that way. It's ones and zeros printed at whatever resolution it's printed at. Meaning it's going to stay that way no matter what. Nothing in the atmosphere can change the way it sounds. Nothing physical can change the way it sounds as long as it's backed up on a hard drive. All that needs to happen is it needs to go through a digital to analog converter, and that is what you're playing back. It's very, very simple in terms of, it's very, very straightforward in terms of what you're actually playing back, because it's been digitized. And there's not a lot that can change the way it sounds as long as you're using a good D to A and a good amplifier and a good set of speakers to then hear it back. An analog tape, there's a few more variables involved. What has to be done is you need to play back this tape the same way it was recorded. And there's not a set standard in terms of a way a tape is recorded. You're dealing with the variable of whatever tape machine recorded the tape and the record electronics of that tape machine, and then also the azimuth, which refers to the angle of the tape head. And this is very important, because if that angle is different, it's going to position the left side, the left channel, slightly ahead or behind the right. And if it's slightly ahead, it needs to be played back just that way, because if you change or alter the position of in time, left or right being slightly ahead of one or the other, you're going to create a phase timing difference between how you're playing back that tape versus how it was recorded, and skew that relation between left and right, and change certainly the recording, which you do not want to do. So I'm going to demonstrate and explain all of this as it happens. We're dealing with an ATR solid state machine, very clean, very punchy tape machine, and we have ours custom modded by Charlie Bolus in terms of its output, specifically designed to work well with our playback electronics. So we're coming out this way, left and right. You'll see one is red, that indicates the right channel. You definitely want to be careful not to flop your channels. This is something that we always pay a lot of attention to. So there you go, left and right is good here. I'm going to tuck these in here nicely so they don't fall out. And on the other end here, we're going to patch right into the input of our console, which is our analog input to our console, which currently it's set to play back out of the digital analog converter. In this case, we're bypassing the D to A and going right into the analog input of the board. This little tape here, this little rubber band here indicates right, and the other is left. So here we go. And now we're patched. So you can see that Gavin already put this take-up reel on the left side, and we have our playback reel on the right side. So you see how my hand is going to guide the leader tape right here so it's ready. If not, if I didn't do that properly, it would fall away. So we want to make sure we always maintain control of the tape. And I'm going to put it right here through the spool. And I'm going to take this off actually so you guys can see exactly what's going on here. This is for cutting tape, and you can actually remove that piece. And I'm going to go right over all of the heads. Now if you see here, that is the head that's most important for us right now. That is the playback head, right? That's the record head, and that's the repro head. This is to record, this is to erase, and this is to play back. So I'm going to go right through here, and I'm going to go right through here. And now you see how that nicely goes through all the guides right here. And you get good at this with lots of practice. But I'm going to thread it through right through here, and I'm going to keep that momentum going. So then it kind of folds in over itself, and now I've got some tension, right? So the way these tape machines work is once they sense tension, they're ready to lock into place. In other words, they're going to pull away from each other to create some tension so that you have control and then you can play it back and everything works. So I'm going to have my finger over stop right here. I'm just going to create a little bit of tension, and now you see that those guides, they just locked right into place. That's the way it's designed. Now another thing to be aware of is you want to have your tools ready. So I have my tweaker tool, and this is to adjust the level off the tape machine as well as the EQ off the tape machine to match exactly what was recorded, which I'm going to walk you through in just a second. And this tool is to adjust the azimuth, which I was referring to earlier, and that is to adjust the angle of the playback head to make sure that we are playing back at the proper angle that it was recorded to, which is always a little different from day to day, tape batch to tape batch. So here we go. You'll also notice that the tones were printed at the tails of the tape, and as Gavin was saying, this tape has been wound off at tails, not at heads. In order to go to heads, I'd have to rewind the tape all the way to the beginning, right? So I'm just going to go until the first leader comes up. Use my flashlight to see it, and I'm going to stop it right when that leader tape comes on, because that's going to show me where the tones begin at the end of the tape. But it's right here for the ready, and I'm just going to wind right to it. So now we're at the beginning of the tones. I'm going to hit play, and we should hear 1K tone, and that is the tone. There it is right there. So what I'm going to do now is determine the amount of level coming off the tape machine. So I'm going to use my VU meters over here to get them to 0, and I'm going to adjust the gain right here at 30 inches per second because that is the speed in which this tape was recorded to. I'm going to play it back just the same way it was recorded, and here we go. The first tone you're going to hear is 1K. That's to determine the level coming off the machine. So I'm paying attention to these bottom 2 meters. Those are the input meters on the console, and those are nicely at 0 right now. What's coming up next is going to be 10K. That's to do 2 things. It's going to be adjusting the high frequency playback EQ of the tape machine, but most importantly and first, I'm going to be looking at the azimuth. So in just a second, this is going to go to 10K. These are nice long tones, which is always preferred. Here we go, that's 10K. Now these are pretty close. I'm just going to do a little bit of adjusting to get these at 0, just so I have a good read of if the angle of the tape head is accurate right now. I'm going to flip the board into mono. See how they didn't change? That's good. That means that we are in a good spot. Our azimuth is already in a good spot because there's no cancellation when I flip this signal into mono. Now you hear 100. I'm going to turn that up a little bit because it's not as loud, just so you guys can hear it. I don't need to hear it, but I know it's 100. I'm going to adjust the low frequency EQ off the playback. Get that to 0. And then we're probably going to hear a lower tone right after this. Usually it's 50. And usually we just even out. So right now I'm fine-tuning the low frequency, which is 50 cycles, 50 hertz. And sometimes there's a little bit of a variance between 100 and 50. So you want to just get close to being as nailed between the 2 places as you can. And sometimes that's somewhere in between. But in this case, we're actually right on the money. It's exactly right at 0 on both frequencies, which is always a good thing because there's just less to think about. So we've ended in a place where we're playing back the tape just the way it was recorded, and although we're playing back with our tape machine through our playback electronics, we have confidence that what we're playing back is what was mixed and what they laid to tape. So there's no variances or allowing for any type of scenarios where something might get off of what was actually recorded. And from there, I'm going to put my mask back on, and I'm going to let Gavin take the end of this video.
So you can see we're practicing safe analog practices. I just wanted to say that what's really important to note in a case like this is that the choices made to play back a tape, whether it's a tube machine, whether it's a solid state machine, what type of electronics, what kind of tubes, gain structure into your converters, all of these decisions have something to do with the color and the flavor of the playback. So even though the tones allow you to play back the way it was recorded, there still is some flavor to the way you're playing it back and the way it's going into an analog console. So when you work digitally, this is something to take into account, because if you use a saturator or something that's going to offer you that type of flavor or color before you even start to do your work and your balancing work and your audio, it's just something to take into account. When you work digitally, you are combining all of these into one project, one way of doing something. That color, that flavor, that blooming effect that we go for. In an analog tape, it's broken down. You line up the tape machine, you get your gain structure. Once you got it played back, you tickle it a little bit with some, compressors and EQs and reset your gain structure and go back to digital. When you work in the box, everything's done. All of those things are done in one place. So keep that in mind. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we'll see you out there on the next one.